Greetings, fellow friends and seekers of Jesus. Today, there's been some very interesting new development in regard to Fiducia Supplicants, which I thought I'd bring to you. And I'm not sure that this is generally out there at all, but it's something from the Cardinal, the former Cardinal of Hong Kong, who is a guy called Joseph Zen. Now, Cardinal Zen, you may or may not know, has been in the news quite a bit over recent months and years. Oh, that's a bit dodgy, isn't it? There we go. Because he has been quite outspoken on numerous issues. So this is, if you put Cardinal Zen in my blog, you can see there's quite a lot of stuff about him where he basically got involved in, obviously, because he was the Cardinal of Hong Kong, he got involved in the Chinese discussions that have been going on in the papacy. Well, he wanted to get involved in it because he had a lot to say about the dangers of the Chinese Communist Party, but he was broadly ignored. And as a result of that, he kind of felt that the Vatican didn't understand China. There was the incident where Cardinal Fernandez said that China was the best implementer. Another Argentinian, by the way, was the best implementer of Catholic social teaching, which was a bit shocking, I think, to Cardinal Zen. So there is a growing synergy. You can see when we talk about the last week where Pope Francis has been praising communism, that there's a bit of a synergy between the Argentinian political system, which has been descending into communism over the last 40 years or so, and, well, even longer, maybe 100 years. And it's absolutely devastated their economy and their country. And they've just elected a new president who's much more conservative and really is not a fan of the communists at all. So it's interesting to see that reflected in the Argentinian members of the Curia in Rome, and especially in the Pope, who seems very pro-communism and seems to see that there's a synergy between Catholic social teaching and communism. This in stark contrast to everything that the Vatican, the Catechism of the Catholic Church, for example, has stated before. So it's really worrying to see the magisterium, if you like. When I say the magisterium, I mean the Pope, the utterances from Rome. So not in any formal way, but just the stuff that's going on is a new direction for Rome, and not a very wise one, I would say. So Cardinal Zen, he's been part of the Jubia that came out in October last year. And this is an article here from 1 Peter 5. I'll put the link to all this stuff so you can read it yourself in the show notes, so you can check it out for yourself. But this is an interview that he gave in December, so you can see that he's approaching 92 years old, so he's retired, but he still has got an authority for the teaching the faith in the diocese, obviously. And in this, he talks about some of the things that are going on in the church. This seems like a delicate moment, a moment in which there are divisions and unrest in some countries, such as Germany. What has been your experience facing these things? So he says, I'm concerned what is happening in Germany seems to be similar to what happened in Holland, where the faith experienced a devastating crisis. So if you don't know, the German church is very rich because they have this tax set up where you have to pay church tax if you want to be buried or, married or receive any of the sacraments. And you have to say that you're not part of that anymore to not pay that tax anymore. So it's made the German church very rich, but at the same time, the German church is very progressive, and therefore it has it's hemorrhaging numbers. Basically, people don't go there anymore. And the German bishops seem to think that's because they're not progressive enough, so they're chasing the culture. And obviously, this is an ever-decreasing circle. If you wanted to, I mean, what's extraordinary about it is that there is a control experiment for that project, which is called the Episcopal churches, the Methodists, the Protestant sects that have tried all these doctrines and have failed miserably. So we know where that trajectory goes. It's a constant discussion that takes place in the Anglican Church in England, where everyone knows what the figures are saying, that they just decrease year on year as they become more and more irrelevant, and yet they keep taking this pill. The answer is constantly more progression, more liberalisation, and it just leads to disaster. So in this little bit here, Cardinal Zen says, today we're experiencing great confusion, and I believe that it is appropriate to point out that the openness to the new does not mean distorting the foundations of our faith. The dear Pontiff Benedict XVI, who I remember with so much affection, warned us of the danger of these doctrinal landslides. How much is this still listened to? It seems to me that today his legacy is not respected, and it's a shame. So you can see here that he's repeating a lot of these things that we've surmised from the actions of Pope Francis. And one of them is that, he really wasn't very fond of Pope Benedict XVI and didn't really do, he's sort of trying to dismantle his legacy completely. And I did another video on that where Pope Benedict XVI's biographer, gives his opinion, which is that opinion basically. So on the Synod and Synodality here, Cardinal Zen says, here too I couldn't help but express my concern. The Synod, as St. Paul VI wanted, is a consultative body for the bishops in union with the Pope. It might seem like making non-bishops vote would be a good thing, but in reality it's not, for the simple fact that it distorts what a synod should be. In this way, the very structure of the church is affected, is completely correct. On the 15th September 1965, Paul VI erected a synod as an emanation of the council and specified, with our apostolic authority, we erect and constitute this noble city a permanent council of bishops for the universal church, subject directly and immediately to our power, and which we name the Synod of Bishops, a synod of bishops, of course. A little further on, the Pope said that this synod should be perfected, but not in the sense of being distorted. I did not hide my dismay at some of the initiatives that were seen during the days of the synod, and I felt discouragement. I must confess. So just before, I've said this before, but just before this synod took place, I wonder if I've lost it now. This is going back to my blog here. I'm just trying to find there. So just before the synod, there was a Jubia from 5 cardinals. These are the 5 cardinals that released it. The whole thing is on my blog there, and they made it public because they were worried about the responses that came back, and then the Vatican made that response public. So there was like a little battle with it. Some people said that the reason that the cardinals didn't make it public, the response was because they didn't want to make it in like magisterial. They didn't want to add to its authority, so they kept it quiet. So the Vatican published it anyway. But what's interesting about it was like the cardinals knew what was going to happen, that there were going to be, and that the Jubia are all about blessing same-sex relationships. And then it wasn't discussed. So it came out that it had been discussed at the Synod and Synodality, and it had been voted down. Obviously, the African bishops were part of that, but I've covered here on my channel some of the responses coming out of the Synod from archbishops and cardinals who are very negative about, some like the methodology of the Synod, the stuff that was discussed, etc., etc., etc. And they used that opportunity to offer a reflection which reaffirmed very strongly church teaching. So that was really valuable. Now, it turns out that what happened, as we all know now, is that instead of talking about it in the Synod of Synodality, or instead of putting it in the document that came out as a result of the Synod and Synodality, that the dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith, so Cardinal Fernandez, had already prepared Fiducia Supplicants. So this was something that they were already going to do, and then they've just released it just before Christmas of their own volition. So really, really undermines everything that was said about synodality in the first place. So that's, a bit dark and murky, and calls into question the whole schema of Pope Francis's papacy in terms of what he is saying that his papacy is about in terms of collegiality, but also, methodology. The Synod and Synodality just turns out to be just a talking shop or a fig leaf to sort of cover the agenda. And this is what a lot of us were saying from the very beginning, that it was just, it looked like they were seeking, they already had the answers and they were just seeking the questions. They just wanted the right questions that they wanted to answer. So deeply problematic in that regard as well. So what we've got today, and literally I've got hold of this morning, is this is Cardinal Zen's personal blog. Now, I've got to give a bit of a caveat here, because Cardinal Zen's blog is in Chinese, right? So the only way my Chinese certainly isn't up to translating it. So what I've done is I've put it through Google Translate, and a lot of it doesn't make sense. I'll warn you now, but some of it is really, really good. So I thought it would be worth getting it out there as quickly as possible. So the first bit here, so begging for confidence, right? It's the title, I would imagine, is Fiducia Supplicans, which translates sort of as begging for confidence. Okay, now that might sound a little bit weird to you, and it is a weird old title. Fiducia can translate as trust. In Italian, it would mean pleading for trust, but I still think it's a bit of a weird title, don't you? And I think it. Sorry, got to have a cup of tea when you're English. It seems like a bit of a. It seems to me like he doesn't. A lot of these titles, like Amoris Laetitia and Fratelli Tutti, and he's carried on using Latin titles for his documents, Pope Francis, but it's like he doesn't really understand how to use Latin. I might be completely off kilter, but when you think about some of the other titles for encyclicals and etc. in the past, it just strikes me as a little bit of a strange title. So that you can see Google Translate has translated this directly as begging for confidence, which is just, I don't know, it's a strange thing. Now, this first bit, I received the pastoral blessing of the statement of the faith of supplication. That's obviously another mistranslation of Fides Supplicans, published by the Catholic Social Communication Service. Hereafter, now that might be the DDF. Who knows? On the 23rd of December. Explanation of the statement issued to the congregation. So that's the further statement issued by the DDF. The short article in the communication also appeared in the December 31st Public Education News. I found that in two key places the communication office article made mistakes. Actually, the Sunday Examiner did not. So I think this is a local Chinese paper, and he's saying, why didn't they deal with it? And this is really diocesan discussion. He's saying that the error that was in the local paper or the Chinese paper was the original text said those who requested blessings were same-sex couples and other people in relationships that are not in line with Christian beliefs. However, the communications office said that those who are asking for blessings were same-sex couples and other people in relationships that are not in line with Christian beliefs. The original text clearly states it is people who are blessed, not the type of relationship. So he's putting a clarification in there. It's obviously an error that was made in the Chinese translation or something like that. Verse 38 of the original text of the statement says that the clergy who give the blessing can pray for them for peace, health, tolerance of adversity, communication with each other, care for each other, and ask for God to enlighten them so they can have the strength to carry out God's will perfectly. Of course, elsewhere in the statement, so that's verse 38. I wonder if we could potentially pull up Fiducia Supplicants and just check this as we go along, and that might be something that's worth doing. Let me see if I can pull it up on the Vatican website. Okay, here we go. Right, so it says in Cardinal Zen's verse 38 of the original text of the statement says that the clergy who can pray for them to have the strength to carry out God's will. So if we go to number 38 of the statement, for this reason, one should neither provide nor promote a ritual for the blessings of a couple in irregular situations. At the same time, one should not prevent or prohibit the church's closeness to people in every situation in which they might seek God's help through a simple blessing. In brief, prayer preceding this spontaneous blessing, the ordained minister could ask that the individuals have peace. Right, so exactly as Cardinal Zen says, peace, health, a spirit of patience, dialogue, and mutual assistance, but also God's light and strength to be able to fulfill his will completely. So that's basically exactly what Cardinal Zen is saying there in this bit here, right? Of course, elsewhere in the statement, it only says live a better life and live a full life. It's not enough to say life is perfect. They may think that life in same-sex unions can also be perfect, but verse 38 says perfectly fulfilling God's holy will. I did not submit the above doubts to the communications office because even if it were correct, word by word, the statement is still very problematic. So he's saying, notwithstanding all these errors, there's still massive problems in Fiducia Supplicants. So then he's got this bit, but 2 or 3 days later I met Miss, I'm not going to say that, she had some serious doubts because she saw the erroneous report from the communications department and asked the communications department to clear up her doubts. So far, I've not seen a reply from the communications office. In fact, this is an important issue. So here's the diocesan element, right? Why did the diocesan communications office handle it? It should not at least have been seen by the parish secretary. Many dioceses and episcopal conferences have given so they've given important interpretations and negative responses. Because these responses continue to appear online, I waited until now to decide to write some of my opinions. Although I no longer have anything to do with the administration of the diocese, I still have a responsibility to maintain the doctrine of the Church. Although the statement of the Vatican, so you've got statements being issued by the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith that are causing concern to cardinals because they do not maintain the doctrine of the faith. And this is from the office of the Doctrine of the Faith. Like, we're in Alice in Wonderland here, aren't we? We really are, and it just smacks of incompetence and the fact that Cardinal Fernandez is not fit for office. That we're at this sort of level, like there might be Jubia of something like this, but there might be clarifications needed. But this whole document is problematic, and it's clear from the responses that we're getting from the Church throughout the Church in the world. Although the statement of the Vatican's Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith has been repeatedly emphasized that any blessing should not be misunderstood, the Church will never recognize the sexual union of a man and a woman of the same sex, or that it is not in line with the Church's beliefs as an alternative marriage. But the statement also said that out of our pastoral charity, under certain circumstances, it is possible to bless same-sex couples and other men and women living in non-compliant relationships. I mean, I think that is problematic in itself to say that, we can bless people in non-compliant relationships, because where do you draw the line with that? As I said in my last video, is that people living in polyamorous relationships or polygamy or incest or, it's very clearly written so that what it is actually about is same-sex couples. It's clearly written with the German Church in mind, but it is that is not in the text. So you've got to be a bit careful, like, what do they actually mean here? And it's not clear what they actually mean because they don't define it. So surely they can't mean, as I said in my last video, surely they can't mean, what it says there, that it's in non-compliant relationships. It can't be all non-compliant relationships, can it? Surely not. I could give other examples, but I'm not. I'll leave it to your imagination. But obviously, it doesn't mean all non-compliant relationships, does it? So, what exactly does it mean, and why isn't it clearer? The long statement leaves many questions, and it is said that no further explanation will be given. Paragraph 41. Ha ha ha! Because loads of clarifications have been given, haven't they? So, many bishops and episcopal conferences, especially in Africa and Eastern Europe, strictly instruct priests not to perform such blessings. So when we talk about the Pope as the source of unity in the church, this Pope is a source of disunity in the church, a Pope of confusion. The minister of the Congregation of the Doctrine of the Faith issued another statement on the 4th of January this year. On the one hand, he strongly denied that the statement on December the 18th violated church doctrine, and on the other hand, he acknowledged that the bishops and the bishops' conferences had reasons to object to that statement. There are some doubts. It seems that they need a long time to study it, and the Holy See understands that it has not been able to allow the priests to implement the statement for the time being. This is equivalent to saying that the statement on December 18th is temporarily invalid. Why didn't they do this work before they issued the statement? Why didn't they consult the church and the bishops? Because the magisterium is the Pope and the bishops. It's not just whatever the Pope says or whatever Fiducia Fernandez says. In this case, we can safely discuss those two statements, and I would like to contribute some of my opinions to Brother Duo. Now, I wonder if that is Tucho. Who knows? Brother Duo. I don't know who Brother Duo is, but, maybe Cardinal Fernandez, maybe not. I should first like to understand that the statement says, I do not know if the statements of December the 18th and the 4th have been translated into Chinese. The churches in Hong Kong, Macau, and Taiwan lack translators, and it seems that there are still no Chinese translations of those two statements. These two statements are actually very complicated. The statement says that blessings are from top to bottom. This bit doesn't make any sense at all, so that must be the translate thing. Blessings are from bottom to top and top to bottom. In fact, Chinese blessings, whatever, I don't know. Can't help you with that one, guys. Spontaneous in declaration should not be translated as active because the opposite of active is passive. And applying for blessings is, of course, active. It seems that spontaneous should be translated as random, not specially arranged in it happens naturally by chance. Okay. Get that? So what he's basically saying is, that is what in English it is spontaneous, isn't it? Is that if someone comes like it, and this is what makes the whole thing a complete nonsense, really, is this spontaneity, that there's this false dichotomy that Cardinal Fernandez has tried to set up between liturgical blessings and spontaneous blessings. Now, we all know that during Mass, and like they say, it's a false dichotomy because why do you go to the priest for a blessing? Because he's a priest, because he's endowed with the power and with the in persona Christi, isn't he? So you're asking the church that's his stole, that's his ministry, that's what you're asking for. So first of all, it's a problematic dichotomy that he set up. And secondly, if it is just spontaneous blessings as the declaration states, then those things were never in question anyway, and they could always happen at Mass or any time when you go up for Holy Communion. I don't particularly agree with it myself, but you've got people, go up with their arms crossed and they receive a blessing. So, and no one inquires about their marital situation or anything like that. The whole problem in the document is this couples and unions nonsense. If, when you think about two people having conjugal relationships, they're coupling, aren't they? But the document tries to say that a couple is different from a union. It's just absolute semantic sophistry, just total nonsense, unfortunately. Really poor, really, really bad. The statement says, for example, blessing a pilgrim group. It is impossible and unnecessary to priest to clarify whether there are any partners in the pilgrimage who are living in abnormal sexual relations. The statement talks about a pair of couples, although it is not a special arrangement. It is obvious that they are couples living in those relationships. The declaration number 38 says that those couples who will ask for blessings may also ask God to give grace and strength that they can fully obey God's holy will. If this were the case, it would be easy for the priest to introduce them to the will of God. But the problem is, the statement says that priests should not examine whether they have such an intention. If the priest is not sure that they have this intention, or has reason to suspect that they have this intention at all, how can the priest give a blessing? This is an excellent point. Fiducia Supplicants basically says, don't ask, don't tell. It's like, the priest shouldn't be asking. But that's the whole ministry of the priest, is to give guidance on these issues. Otherwise, what's the point of having any doctrine at all? Number 3 here is from Cardinal Zen. The statement says that this kind of blessing comes from the love of shepherds, the love of the shepherds. But doesn't the Bible say that shepherds should protect the strong sheep, heal the injured, and lead back the lost? That statement seems to say that they came as a pair and returned as a pair after the blessing. That doesn't mean that they, at least for the time being, can still be in that irregular and sinful way live on. So what he's saying there is that the document, it says that they come as a pair, but they don't ask for. They're not led back. That pair aren't led back. They're not helped to change their lives or to understand what the problem is. Instead, they're just left and they leave in a sinful way and to continue in a sinful way. So how can we bless that? Sometimes in the gospel, someone asked Jesus to heal a sick person, but he first said, your sins are forgiven. His primary concern is to free people from their sins, although he has also given them the grace to confess their sins. If the priest is not sure that the couple he is facing intends to fully abide by the way of life prescribed by God, or is sure that they do not admit that they are living in sin, he should not use the most charitable attitude to give her. I don't think that's him. Well, do we introduce God's will? I'm going to have to read that again. Sorry. Although he has given them, so his primary concern is to free them from their sins. Right, cool. Although he has also given them the grace to confess their sins. Absolutely. So that is meeting the Spirit, isn't it? It's being convicted in the Spirit. It's recognizing that you need to change your life. And that is sort of one of the key things, metanoia, in the gospel. One of the key things that Jesus does, repent and believe the gospel, for the kingdom of God is at hand. If the priest is not sure that the couple he is facing intends to fully abide by the way of life prescribed by God, or is sure that they do not admit that they are living in sin, he should not use the most charitable attitude to give. He should not use the most charitable attitude to give him. Do we introduce God's will? Right, okay. Still don't really understand that, but I think what he's saying is it would be more Christ-like, it would be more charitable to introduce God's will, to say this is, because if we believe that is the truth, then that, if we hold back from sharing it with people, we don't do them any favors, do we? So, and the gift of a priest is to be able to do that in a charitable way, in a caring way, in a pastoral way. Such blessings, so number 4, such blessings actually create confusion in the impression given to others. The statement repeatedly emphasizes the need to avoid creating confusion, but the blessings encouraged by the statement will in fact inevitably create confusion. The secular media certainly intentionally adds to confusion, but they aren't pro-LGBT pastors. Aren't pro-LGBT pastors within the church, such as Father James Martin, SJ, or Sister Janine Gramick. Also, so these are both people that Pope Francis has welcomed into the Vatican, if you don't know. Sister Janine, I'm sure you know Father James Martin, who's this Jesuit whose sole ministry seems to be to promote homosexuality within the church. Sister Janine Gramick was the head of New Ways Ministry, I want to say, which is like it's an organisation that is that believes in same-sex marriage and is actively seeking to change church teaching on this issue. And Pope Francis recently wrote to her and told her she was amazing. Like some other dioceses in Germany or other countries not adhering to, why doesn't the Holy See stop some of the rules specified in the declaration? Is it in line with the principles of the herdsman to create confusion in this important issue? The herdsman, the shepherd, I would imagine that's supposed to be. And, this is a really, really good point, and it speaks to a tragedy, really, that's going on in the church. We've just had this week a terrible situation where there was some good priests who were removed from a position in a church. They probably unwisely, it was probably not prudent of them to record and publicise their homily, but they gave a homily where they were critical of some things that are going on in the church, and as a result of that, they were, they've been closed down and cancelled. And it's really hard, I think. I do think it was probably unwise of them to do that in the current climate, but you've got lots of stuff going on. Father Marco Rupnik is a brilliant example, and none of these people are removed. They're just allowed to continue, and Father James Martin is another good example. And so it very clearly seems that the good ones are, if you're saying anything pro the church, you're removed by the Vatican. And if you're saying anything contra the church, you're rewarded by the Vatican. And this is, as our Lord says, a house divided itself cannot stand. Do we believe what the church teaches or not? And if we don't, why are we in the church destroying it from the root up? Surely that can only be from the enemy. It's really disturbing. And these issues as well, you have to remember, strike at the heart of the family, and they've got real implications for parents with same-sex attracted children who are trying to discern what they should be teaching, because you're getting extremely mixed messages now from the Vatican, to the point where you could have an argument with your son or daughter where what the church teaches isn't clear, and they could say what Pope Francis is saying, and that could be in contradiction to the catechism. I mean, it's not any sane way to continue. It really makes me sad and upset. So Pope Francis, sort it out for goodness sake. Okay, this is the last little bit now with Cardinal Zen. In many areas, especially the marginal areas often mentioned by Pope Francis, their culture is extremely opposed to condoning same-sex relationships or even punishing them legally. So it won't condone them. Some parts of Africa, it's against the law. Was the Congregation of the Doctrine of Faith really ignorant? So was it a ridiculous thing to do? I mean, it really does seem a ridiculous thing to do. That was only going to cause strife. The most serious thing is the statement of the congregation. And what motivates it? Is it money? Is it because the German church is rich? Is it because the people involved in it are gay themselves? Are they have they got their own peccadillos and they're trying to normalise or, change the way that the church teaches on these issues? Whatever way you look at it, it's a massive, massive problem from the very head of the church, which contradicts 2,000 years of teaching. And you could say sacred scripture, Matthew 19, Jesus talks about this directly. So, number 5, the most serious thing is the statement of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, which says sexual behaviour in same-sex relationships also has its own goodness, and it can progress and grow. Similarly, when the Pope, more likely the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, responded to it actually says Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith there, which it didn't at the beginning, but anyway, responded to the 5 cardinals' questions. He also, that was the Jubia that Cardinal Zen was involved in just before the Synod in October. He also said that same-sex sex and marital love are similar. This is an absolutely subjective error. According to the objective truth, that behaviour is a serious sin and cannot lead to any good. Pope Benedict said, If it is not based on truth, love becomes an empty shell into which anything can be put. If the minister for the congregation of the doctrine of the faith calls a serious crime, so this is the standout headline, if you like. So I think when he says if the minister for the congregation of the doctrine of faith, he means Fernandez, yeah, he means the head and the prefect, and probably they've translated prefect as minister. So if the prefect for the dicastery for the doctrine of the faith calls a serious crime a good, wouldn't he be committing heresy? Question mark. Shouldn't the minister resign or be dismissed? So basically, he's calling Tucho a heretic. He's saying he's teaching heresy, and he should either resign or be dismissed. Finally, in fact, isn't there a global synod of bishops in progress? It is hoped that all this October's meeting, the bishops will finally be able to debate these issues autonomously, not necessarily led by facilitators, and be led by the Holy Spirit to reach unanimous conclusions. The Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith made a preemptive statement, which is a serious contempt for the office of bishops, successors of the apostles and brothers of the Pope. So that speaks to the fact that the collegiality is being damaged by these sort of actions. But I think that is really a powerful statement from Cardinal Zen there. I'm sure you'd agree. And one of the things that it reminded me of, or a really important comment in this regard, is this bit about sexual behaviour. You know, that it's becoming increasingly obvious that Cardinal Fernandez has got a very, very dodgy background indeed. There are numerous examples of this, and this is an interview that my dear friend Dr. Gavin Ashton gave with Professor Larry Chapp, who is someone else I really admire, a retired Catholic professor in Pennsylvania in America. And this is a section where they discuss Fernandez's legacy, some of the books that he's written in the past. And I just wanted to play this to you and see what you think. How this ties in quite beautifully with what Cardinal Zen has said there, I think. Okay, so I'll put the link to the full. It's a very long interview that Larry Chapp's done there, but they get on. They clearly get on extremely well, and this is what Gavin is explaining the connection between what Fernandez is teaching here and these extremely dodgy ideas that seem to have fed their way into his ideology, and now he's trying to push it on the church, and Francis is complicit in this. And I can't believe that this is even taking place in the Catholic Church, the church that I'm part of and church that I love, and I don't recognise it as being Catholic at all. So we've got to recognise that this is what it is, and we've got to resist it. It's really, really worrying. And there's further evidence that's just come out, which is published in the Catholic thing here. And these are multiple texts. I'm not going to go through them, but basically there's loads of quotes here that are seriously, seriously problematic from Fernandez. So what do we do with all of this? I don't know. As Cardinal Zen says, I think we've got to push for Cardinal Fernandez to be removed. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous that he's pushing this stuff on the church, and it seems very personal to him that he's putting it on, putting it forward and trying to make it magisterial. I literally can't believe it's so ridiculous. So, friends, thank you very much. I'm going to leave you in peace now. I'll put the links in the description. If you've got any questions or anything, please do leave them in the comments and I'll get back to you. I really enjoy interacting with the people who are watching my video. So thank you very much. I really do appreciate your time and effort and engagement. There's a little link there to buy me a coffee. If you wanted to chuck me $5 or whatever, it would go a long way to helping out at this end. So I'd really appreciate that. And like and subscribe, and perhaps share it with other interested parties. So pray for the church and say a prayer for me while you're at it. God bless you all, and I'll see you on the next video. Thanks for watching.